Good morning all. Welcome to the national webinar on the economics of public health and climate change, challenges and strategies, organized by the Department of Economics, Jyotinivas College, Autonomous. On behalf of the Department of Economics, I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Sister Lalita Thomas, Principal, Jyotinivas College, the eminent resource persons, Dr. V. Selvaraju and Dr. Krishna Raj, faculty members, research scholars, and dear students. In keeping with the tradition of our college, we begin with the lighting of the lamp. I request Dr. Sister Lalita Thomas to inaugurate the webinar by lighting the lamp of knowledge and wisdom and address the participants.
Good morning, and I extend a warm welcome to our resource persons once again, Dr. Selvaraju and Krishna Raj. Thank you for accepting our invitation. A warm welcome to all our participants. Today, let us deliberate and discuss to bring change. I congratulate the Department of Economics for organizing a national webinar on a topic of special significance and relevance to all of us. Today's webinar on the economics of public health and climate change will be a forum to deliberate on two areas that require urgent attention. COVID-19 has turned our society upside down, and the devastating effects on the health and resilience of our communities will be felt far into the future, including through devastating debt, a slowdown in sustainable development, and increased vulnerability to climate change. Decades of irresponsible economic and social practices have led us to where we are today. Climate change is impacting human lives and health in a variety of ways. We have to focus on health and green recovery. Our resource persons with a vast experience, I'm sure, will highlight on issues that concerns us, and I'm very much interested to listen to about who bears the health cost and what lessons to take from the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope at the end of the day, all participants will take away valuable information from this webinar. Wishing you all an interesting, intellectually stimulating day ahead. God bless all of us. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, sister, for your wishes and encouragement. Jyotinivas College Autonomous is re-accredited by NAC with A+ grade in 2021 in the fourth cycle of re-accreditation. The Department of Economics, upholding the principles of excellence and relevance, regularly conducts seminars, conferences, workshops, and guest lectures. In this context, and to commemorate 75 years of Indian independence, this national webinar is organized. It encompasses two highly relevant concerns in the current scenario: public health and climate change. I hope this national webinar provides a meaningful platform for fruitful knowledge sharing and discussion. I request Dr. Anuja, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, to introduce the resource persons for this webinar. Thank you. Have a good day.
Good morning, one and all. Thank you, Dr. Radha. It's my privilege to introduce our resource person, Dr. Krishna Raj, Professor at Center for Economic Studies and Policy, Institute for Social and Economic Change, ISEC, Bangalore. Most of his research works are in the field of environmental economics. With 23 years of academic experience, Dr. Krishna Raj has guided several PhD scholars at ISEC. He served as the chairperson on Indian economy in Indian Council for Cultural Relations, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, at Hankook University, Seoul, South Korea. He was visiting scholar at University of Wisconsin, USA, and visiting professor at Kannur University. He was awarded Ratan Tata Trust Research Fellowship for the collaborative research with University of Wisconsin, USA. There are numerous research papers at his credit. He has served as the expert committee member for state and central governments. Currently, he is an expert committee member of Karnataka State Wetland Conservation Authority. He has submitted many reports to Karnataka government for policy implications. His works have been featured in national and international media. Dr. Krishna Raj will be enlightening us about the economic cost of climate change and COVID-19. Who bears the health cost? Sir, we are privileged to have you here with us today, and I request you to take over the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for your nice introduction about me. I am happy to join this national webinar on climate change and health. This is a timely conduct of the seminar to understand the issues and the interrelationship between the health and climate change, and also we are living in the conditions of conditions which are affecting by the COVID-19. And I am highly thankful to the Jyoti Nivas College for inviting me for this national webinar. And I am happy to share some of my views on climate change and COVID-19. Who bears the cost? I'll take a minute to share my PPT with you. The topic I have chosen for today's webinar is that the economic cost of climate change and COVID-19. Who bears the health cost? The structure of my presentation is as follows: climate change and public health nexus, and in the following slides, I'll be dealing with COVID-19, the scientific sources of its outbreak, and I also cover some of the issues related to economic development and COVID-19 causes and consequences. Further, I'll move on post-COVID-19 and policy discourse towards economic development, the human approach or behavioral changes towards environment and development. And finally, I give a policy perspective, a broad policy perspective, which is on the need to shift the economic development from capitalism to sustainable development. Yes, we all understand the health plays an important role in economic development of any country. The health in the sense that the productivity of labor, the health in the sense that how it contributes to overall economic development of the country. We know that in India, India is considered to be a young country in terms of demographic dividend. So the demographic dividend one can reap, or nation can reap, when the people are healthy and highly productive. So in the era of COVID-19, almost all the sections, almost all the people are affected irrespective of the age group. If you look at the second wave, even the younger people were also affected by the COVID-19. So this clearly shows that when a nation wants to repay a demographic dividend, so the country not only should be young in terms of productive labor, but most importantly, the people should be healthy, and also they should have jobs to do the productive work. So the health uh, and the employment are very important for making use of the demographic dividend, especially to enhance the productivity of the economy. In this context, I need not explain more because Professor Dr. Selva Kumar, Selva Raj, the known health economist, he will be dealing on all these issues, health and the importance of health and all those issues he will cover. So just I will focus mainly on the climate change and COVID-19. So the health and welfare play an important role in economic development. Public health affects economic growth directly through labor productivity and economic burden of illness. Human beings try hard to make themselves happy, and it is strongly believed that economic development is the reason for it. Certainly, economic development makes man happy, but it is not the end in itself. Utility or welfare is a function of market and non-market goods and services, including health, environmental goods, and other services. It is a known fact that among the global environmental issues, climate change is the biggest challenge of the 21st century, triggered by the mounting greenhouse gases and consequent increase in the Earth's average temperature about 0.18 degrees Celsius in the last 1 decade. If you look at the latest IPCC report, assessment report 6, it has already predicted that the Earth has already warmed up by 1 degree Celsius since 1950, and it will be the Earth's temperature will be increased to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2040, and at the end of the century, it may reach even 2 degrees Celsius, and all the efforts of the governments at the international level, and they want to achieve the targets of both Paris Convention as well as Kyoto Protocol, they have significantly failed. So it means that climate change is real and it is affecting every one of us in all respects. So climate and weather have always had a powerful impact on public health and well-being. Climate change is induced by relatively recent rapid economic development, particularly after that almost all the countries are following the format of capitalism, and capitalism certainly a mass production and mass consumption. It main characteristics of capitalism is that mass production and mass consumption. Climate change is a global or transboundary negative externality with high carbon growth in recent years. The impact of climate change includes extreme temperature, severe droughts and floods, insect outbreaks, and health impacts like COVID-19, declining water resources, increased wildfire, reduced agricultural yields, and so on. This is mainly attributed to the rapid industrialization, mass production, and mass consumerism under the economic model of capitalism, which have squarely undermined the role of environment. Even the cost of climate change are highly pervasive in nature. The Stern report on the economics of climate change, it is popularly known as the Stern Review, published in 2007 by the UK government, observes that the economic cost of climate change are significant and capable of severely aggravating economic and environmental problems, especially in poor countries like India. This implies that world economy is richer and environmentally poor. So the emission of greenhouse gases and consequent climate change, which imposes high economic, environmental, and health cost on the society at large. So one can easily understand what is climate change and greenhouse gases. So Earth cannot survive without energy. We receive energy from the sun. So the energy from the sun gives us a lot of strength, or energy plays an important role in all economic activities and human activities. So when we receive energy from the sun, that is called as the solar energy is absolutely by the the solar energy radiation is considered as the energy from the sun is considered as long wave energy, or the solar radiations passes through the clear atmosphere. The incoming solar radiation is also called as the long wave energy. So it passes at the speed of 343 watts per square meter. That is the speed in which the energy passes through the atmosphere towards the Earth. So you know that Earth absorbs a part of the energy, and after that warms up, it also reflects or also passes on the part of the energy towards the atmosphere and towards the sun. This is called as a short wave energy. The wave coming from the sun is considered as long wave. This is the outgoing energy called as short wave from the Earth. So what is the impact of these greenhouse gases? You know that there are several greenhouse gases are emitted. These are called as carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, fluorofluorocarbons, methane, and other gases. They are released into the atmosphere through various economic activities like industrial activities, transportation, pollution, and even agriculture production activities, and even ozone also generates methane. So these greenhouse gases concentrated in the stratosphere. There are several segments in the atmosphere, so it is concentrated in the stratosphere. So these greenhouse gases, when they allow the incoming energy from the sun, because the speed in which they come, they have to allow. But the outgoing energy from the Earth, it goes at the speed of 168 watt per square meter. So these energy are absorbed by the greenhouse gases. When they absorb these greenhouse gas, when the greenhouse gases absorb this energy, they reflect back towards the Earth. That is called as warming up of the Earth. This is also called as climate change, and sometimes it is called as global warming. So there is a imbalance between outgoing energy and incoming energy. There are a lot of incoming energy is allowed, but outgoing energy to escape into the atmosphere is not allowed by the greenhouse gases. Therefore, Earth is warming up day by day due to increasing level of economic activities throughout the world under the era of capitalism. This is also popularly known as greenhouse effect, as we use the greenhouses for growing various plants. You know that in the greenhouse we use plastics. The plastics allows the incoming energy from the sun, but it does not allow escaping of energy outside. So it traps the energy. Therefore, the plants grow fast because the energy is absorbed by the plants. So this is the mechanism of greenhouse effect. Some of you must be knowing better than me, but this is how one can understand easily. So this slide clearly gives an idea how the greenhouse gases are the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere for the last several years, especially from pre-industrial concentration to concentration in 2018, and their atmospheric lifetime, how long they live in the atmosphere. So there are various compounds or greenhouse gases. Already I have mentioned carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and various chlorofluorocarbons, etc., sulfur, fluorocarbons, etc. These carbons, earlier, what is the parts per million? Now, what is their level of concentration in parts per million? So if you look at the source also, you can find out what is the economic activity that leads to emission of these gases. There are various sources, especially for carbon dioxide, fossil fuels, cement production, land use change, etc. In case of methane, fossil fuels, rice paddies, waste dumps, livestock. In case of nitrous oxide, fertilizer combustion, fertilizer production, combustion, industrial processes, etc. Likewise, there are various sources, especially if you look at this fluorocarbon. It was invented by the scientists in 1930s. It is a man-made gas. It is not a natural gas. When the scientists discovered this man-made gas in 1930s, it is highly used in refrigerators, cold storages, even for aerosols and other equipment. Especially this is used for storing the goods. It is a cold. It has a cooling effect. So therefore, these fluorocarbons are considered as the very important invention among the discoveries of the scientific discoveries. But in 70s and 80s, the impact of fluorocarbon on ozone depletion is discovered. So later, the whole world awakened to the problems they are going to face in the future. As a result, the climate change needs to be controlled and mitigated. Otherwise, the world may not be in a position to live on the earth because of warming up of the earth. So this is the awakening call by the United Nations through various IPCC reports. So you understand how long they will live their lifetime by each compound or pollutions. Now let us understand, after understanding the climate change, how it will affect the health, how it increases the health risks. The environmental destruction by greenhouse gases has been accelerated. The discovery of man-made gas chlorofluorocarbons in 1930s used as coolants, which destroyed ozone layer, but scientifically discovered in 1980s after 5 decades of destruction. The reports of various working groups of Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have observed that economic impacts of climate change poses very serious global risks. The climate change is led to sensitivity, resilience, and vulnerability. So you can understand what is sensitivity. Then sensitivity is the degree or magnitude or rate at which economic and environmental systems are affected or stressed either adversely or beneficially by the variability in climate change. The resilience is that the ability of an economic and environmental systems to recover from the effect of an extreme climate variability that might have caused harmful impacts. And the vulnerability is that the extent to which an economy or environment is unable to cope up with the negative impacts of climate change, variability, and extremes. So this modeling of climate change from emissions to impact can give us an idea how the economic development leads to climate change and climate change leads to socio-economic and health impacts. So with the beginning, growth of population, change in technology, especially discovery of chlorofluorocarbons like that, and change in the nature of production or pattern of production and consumption that leads to emissions of various greenhouse gases. And these greenhouse gases are highly concentrated in the atmosphere or stratosphere, and these have radiative forcing and global climate, and they increases the warming, increases the climate on the earth, and there will be regional climate and weather changes, especially you know that the land and the ozones, they have different temperatures. If there is any change in the temperature level between land surface and the ozone surface, then you know that we face the problems including cyclones and floods, etc., heavy precipitation. So this will have direct impact on the economy and environment. Direct impact including the forest ecosystem will change, and also the rivers will be affected, the economy, agriculture will be affected, the industry will be affected, like that. So at the same time, at the micro level, the people at large will be affected, socio-economic impacts will be affected, the health is also being affected. In this way, every day we face the challenges of climate change. This is mainly due to our rapid economic development in the recent times. Climate change and public health. Let us discuss, after discussing the interrelationship between climate change and public health, let us understand climate change and public health. The world is economically rich with global GDP, which is about 84.93 trillion US dollars, and environmentally poor. Consequently, the human beings face unprecedented risks and uncertainty in the 21st century. There are public health, economic, and environmental risks. The climate change led by capitalism has rapidly transformed the Earth's environment in the 21st century and allowed the growth of foodborne diseases. This is also called as coronaviruses, and advent of antimicrobial resistance. So just like human beings adapt to the climate change, the various plants, various flora and fauna or microorganisms, they also adapt to these situations. They also adapt to the conditions of the climate. So when they adapt, so it will certainly have impact on either the food they consume, or they may migrate to other places, or they will have different impact on the environment, or even on the health of the human beings. You will understand these linkages in the coming slides. The scientists face the uphill tasks to unravel the mystery or secrets of coronaviruses by reopening the books on infectious diseases to save the humanity from the destruction. So in recent years, most of the scientists have concluded that the infectious diseases are almost over in the world, and they are no more exist. You know that recently we eradicated polio. So this is also one of the disease which caused by some microbes or some viruses. So likewise, the scientists have started believing that almost the world has eradicated the infectious diseases. But all of a sudden, the COVID onslaught has proved them wrong. Now, the very survival of human beings is challenged by COVID-19 pandemic and recent waves and new variants and mutations like the Delta and other variants. They are almost threatening the existence of human beings on the earth. Even survival is the very challenging under this situation. You know that public health conditions in India, I need not explain in detail, because I need to concentrate more on the linkage between climate change and COVID-19. But 2-3 issues I need to highlight. India's remarkable economic development, particularly in terms of gross domestic product growth, is accompanied by growing income disparities between the rich and the poor. Research evidences have shown that income inequality or disparity between the different socioeconomic classes is associated with the worst health outcomes. The dividends of India's demography of a substantially increased labor is linked to only if the population is healthy. India faces three public health challenges or triple burden of disease: the growing number of infectious diseases, the rising of non-communicable diseases, NCDs, linked with lifestyle changes, emergence of new pathogens causing epidemics and pandemics. In addition, the health infrastructure is already overstretched in both urban and rural areas. Climate change, which is substantially going to alter the economy and public health, the biggest challenge for India, as 48% of the people are still poor. So some scientific evidences I would like to give you how we can link the climate change with public health. Frequent changes in weather causes infection. That is well known. Cold, fever, headache, vomiting, tiredness, breathlessness, asthma. One can face with the increase in the temperature. This is common everywhere. During the summer season, we face all these problems. So every year, a major cause of human disease and death worldwide is infection with the various pathogens, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa that are intrinsic to our ecosystem. So this picture or figure that clearly shows that how we are surrounded by various pathogens, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. Pathogens we have, and also various other fungi and protozoa we have. They have different, they cause different diseases. Protemics and infectious diseases, you can understand. What are the pathogens, pathogen composition, pathogen species and strain differences, and intact microbe analysis by native MS, host protein content. Like that, they have their own strains and they cause different infectious diseases that is well established in the health and scientific field that needs no explanation at all. So what is the impact of climate change on public health? These are the pathways which climate change affects human health according to UNEP and World Health Organization reports. Climate change leads to human exposures to regional weather changes, heat waves, extreme weather, temperature, and precipitation. And modulating influences are contamination pathways, transmission dynamics, change in agroecosystem hydrologies, ecosystem and hydrology, socio-economic and demographic disruptions. Health effects include temperature-related illness and death, extreme weather-related health effects, air pollution-related health effects, water and foodborne diseases, vector-borne and rodent-borne diseases, effects of food and water shortages, mental, nutritional, infectious, and other health effects. So these are some of the health issues caused by the changes in the weather and exposure to the such climatic conditions. Let us further go in detail, in deep analysis we can do. The climate change and vector-borne diseases. Vector-borne diseases are illness that are transmitted by vectors, which include mosquitoes, ticks, and fleas. These vectors can carry infective pathogens such as viruses, bacteria, and protozoa, which can be transferred from one host to another. The seasonality, distribution, and prevalence of vector-borne diseases are influenced significantly by climate factors, primarily high and low temperature extremes and precipitation patterns. climate change is likely to have both short and long-term effects on vector-borne diseases, disease transmission, and infection patterns, affecting both seasonal risk and broad geographic changes in disease occurrence over decades. While climate variability and climate change both alter the transmission of vector-borne diseases, they will likely interact with many other factors, including how pathogens adapt and change, the availability of hosts, changing ecosystems, and land use change, and demographics, human behavior, and adaptive capacity. These complex interactions make it difficult to predict the effect of climate change on vector-borne diseases. And some other scientific studies have also shown there is genetic relations, anthropogenesis and genesis relationship between the climate change and public health, and how anthropogenesis and genesis have interlinkage. A disease which can be transmitted to humans from animals. The genesis is considered as a disease which can be transmitted to humans from animals. For example, COVID, for example, it is transmitted from bats to humans. Human diseases are caused by due to loss of biodiversity, habitat fragmentation, climate change, land use change, and domestication of wild, bringing the unwanted pathogens into the human body. About 60% of all infectious diseases in humans are genetic in origin, and they normally exist in animals but can infect humans. Several experts point to pandemics such as severe acute respiratory syndromes, popularly known as SARS, Middle East respiratory syndromes, MERS, even flu, monkeypox, and even Ebola diseases are increased as a result of the live trade in illegal wildlife. In this way, what we can understand is that there are, in this figure, 4 main types of transmission cycle for infectious diseases. The first one is anthropogenesis, direct transmission from humans to humans. Indirect transmission, humans through vectors like mosquitoes, ticks, etc. These are the vehicles in which they carry the diseases, humans to humans, and vector vehicle again humans. So the anthropogenesis means humans to humans, whereas in case of zoonosis, animals to animals and humans. Animals, vector vehicles like mosquitoes, bats, and wild illegal wildlife trade, or eating even the live flesh of animals, etc. This leads to animals to vector or vehicle, animals, then vector vehicles, then humans. So this is having a relationship between climate change, change in the animals' behavior, or they need to adapt to the different food cycles. Then these diseases are transmitted to finally humans. There is a very good report by the UK government, COVID-19 outbreak, the scientific sources. In this book, Foresight, long back it is written, it is I think in 2006, they predicted some unforeseen diseases like COVID. So this report identified, aimed at detection, identification, and monitoring of infectious diseases, and to assess how they might transform our capabilities in managing future threat. Disease in humans, animals, and plants are considered equally. So this report clearly studies the interrelationship between humans, animals, and plants, and it forecasts how it can be dealt, these diseases can be dealt in the future. If you take the example of China, you know that the COVID originated in China. The relationship we can understand between economy and environmental destruction in China alone. Environmental health and economy. If you look at China's economy accounted around 4% of the world's GDP in 2003 and now commands 16.3%. It is the world's second largest economy. And the SARS and coronaviruses epidemics originated in China. This strongly advocates that there is a relationship between economy and environmental destruction. This might have caused the emergence of SARS and also later considered as the SARS renamed as coronaviruses. I can give one example, a quick example for this destruction of environment and also health effects and even productivity, agriculture productivity, etc. In Malaysia, there is a fruit called durian fruit. It is a tree crop, and Malaysia used to export these durian crops and used to earn a lot of foreign exchanges. So after some time, the durian fruit production and productivity has drastically fallen down. As a result, the government of Malaysia has worried seriously what is the reason for a drastic reduction in productivity and production of the durian fruit. As a result, it constituted an expert committee, and this scientific committee investigated what is the reason for a sudden fall in the durian crops or fruits production. So they discovered that the durian tree production has drastically fallen because the government of Malaysia has given some mountains for cement production. So the cement production industries have digged up all these mountains where the caves were there. Caves. In these caves, there are so many bats were living. And these bats were being destroyed by the cement industry. So the caves were earlier occupied by the bats. Now the cement industry destroyed these caves. As a result, the death of bats. As a result, the durian crop has fallen down because the pollination the bats used to carry has been affected by this. Productivity of this crop has affected the productivity of this crop. So in this way, there is a strong relationship between the animals, plants, and human health, and also the productivity of the agriculture productivity. Therefore, what we need to understand is that severe acute respiratory syndrome emerged in late 2002 from animals, animal reservoir, and passed on to humans, probably in association with wild animal market in southern China. That is Yuan market in southern China. Further, the COVID-19 outbreak scientific sources, it is evident that the spread of new infectious diseases are basically involving human, animals, and plants. Coronaviruses are single-stranded RNA viruses that can infect not only humans, but also use variety of animals as well. SARS is originated from the bats and consuming various animals as foodstuffs like bats, snakes, cats, mice, rats, dogs, pigs, etc. by the Chinese and other people in the various continents, especially in also Africa. However, the change in the pattern of infectious diseases is mainly attributed to the changes in the behavioral pattern of society, production, consumption, technology, and the microorganisms of the earth. The coronavirus originated in Yuan wet market, where wild animals and their meat are sold. The recent report by United Nations Environmental Programme published in 2020 after the coronavirus, the title of the report is that preventing the next epidemic, zoonotic diseases, and how to break the chain of transmission. COVID-19 illness is zoonotic in nature. a type of disease that transmits between animals and humans. About 60% of known infectious diseases in humans and 75% of all emerging infectious diseases are genetic, such as Ebola, SARS, Zika virus, and bird flu, all came to people by way of animals. What is the economic impact of all this COVID-19 on us, on the world? The World Zoonosis Day was observed on July 6th every year to commemorate the first vaccination against zoonotic disease that was administered by the French biologist Louis Pasteur in 1885. The observation received more importance given the COVID-19 pandemic that crippled the world for more than a year. COVID-19 continues to pose a potential public health and economic risks and uncertainties throughout the world, even after it was first discovered in Yuan city of China in December 2019. The total reported cases of coronavirus worldwide so far, it is more than 18.86 crores, of which 2.15% or 4.0 million people lost their lives, which is equivalent to the size of the population of Georgia. Within the span of 2 months, the world is grappled with overwhelming global health and devastating economic crisis in terms of loss of millions of lives and livelihood. What is the economic impact? The impact of COVID-19 on global economy in 2020 is catastrophic. IMF 2020 report has predicted that about 4.4% contraction of global economy and is expected to contract further due to COVID-19 continuation. Studies indicated that COVID-19 reduced global economic growth to an annualized rate of 4.5% to -6% in 2020, with a partial recovery of 2.5% to 5.2% projected by the World Bank for 2021. According to the Economist magazine, the economic cost is estimated around $10 trillion in foregone GDP over 2020-21. The International Labour Organization estimated that 495 million full-time jobs have been lost in 2020 alone. Further study by the World Bank estimates that about 150 million people could be pushed into extreme poverty by 2021 because of loss of jobs. G20 countries have spent more than $12 trillion to deal with the consequences of the pandemic, especially for the vaccination drive. The evidences have shown that COVID-19 pandemic has caused extensive health, economic, and environmental risks and uncertainties for every one of us. Public health risks and job losses have threatened the sustenance of millions of people in India. The lessons of COVID-19 are very expensive in terms of human death, loss of job, and impact on the economy. COVID-19 pandemic poses a careful choice to society and economy, as Charles Darwin observes that it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the intelligent, but the one most responsive to change or who adapts to the situation. Therefore, what lessons we can understand from the theories of economics or the policies of economics is that mitigation and adaptation as behavioral change in the post-COVID-19 is the need of the hour. The Stern report, that already we discussed, state that in uncontrolled emissions of greenhouse gases will lead to potential climate change, which in turn will impose high degree of environmental and economic cost on the society. So economics offers a useful framework for thinking about policy. Behavioral economics is an alternative framework which prescribes strategies and rational use of policy. Daniel Kahneman has given a different policy perspective to deal with the economic choice before the consumers and producers, which is alternative to regulatory and price-based solutions like taxes and subsidies. So in case of mitigation, how we can mitigate the climate change? Mitigation of climate changes helps in reducing carbon footprints or emissions of greenhouse gases and prevents the planet from warming up. The reducing greenhouse gases sources such as burning fossil fuels for electricity generation, heat and transportation, or enhancing the carbon sinks such as afforestation to stabilize greenhouse gas levels. Adaptation requires changes in the behavior of human and ecosystem. The adaptation measures involves change in production and consumption patterns and promote environmental friendly industrial and agriculture production and consumption pattern. So the climate change has given us a choice whether we can continue mass production and mass consumption. And the behavioral economics gives us an idea that we need to choose very carefully. That is, conscious production and conscious consumption is very important. And we should respect the nature and we should respect the resources, including money. So we should not overspend. If we overspend, that money will not be there to spend for essential needs. So therefore, we should make a careful choice in our approach to the economy and environment and consumption of goods and services in day-to-day life. So climate change affects everyone. However, the economic development benefits a few. You know that very well. You understood the inequality in fruits, the distribution of fruits of economic development. Climate change affects everyone. However, the economic development benefits a few due to unequal distribution of income or benefits of development. Further, the climate change imposes high social cost on the society and industries, and corporate companies which cause climate change hardly spend on mitigating climate change. This reflects the situation of privatizing the profits and universalizing or socializing pollution or the losses. This shows that appropriation of global commons, including climate, by a few rich business tycoons. In other words, the cost of climate change is borne by the government and profits are appropriated by the business. This reminds the grim situation of financing climate change predominantly by the government and hardly by the private sector, which makes a huge profit by appropriating environmental resources and polluting ecosystems services. The policy approach towards mitigation and adaptation of climate changes and challenges that are given the poor financial resources made available to the global at the reasonable level. That it means that the policy approach towards mitigation and adaptation of climate change have failed miserably, and they are giving more challenge in the coming years. As I already indicated, the IPCC assessment report 6 has given the world has failed to curtail the pollution and also temperature level by less than 2 degrees Celsius. Is there any model of change in economic format or in which we are following? The economic model we are following is capitalism. Is there any change to economic model of capitalism? So is there a way capitalism to sustainable development? COVID-19 will shape economic losses through supply and demand, affecting investment, production, household consumption, and international trade. The production cost is increasing and profits are plummeting, making every one of us earn more, lead the market-driven life, greed rather than need. New consumers now under the COVID period, consumers are buying fewer things as they worry about virus and its spread. Need rather greed or wants. Now we are focusing only on needs rather than greed or wants. Our solutions are in nature. The world lost many opportunities to make development a sustainable one. In 1972, Stockholm Conference on Human Environment or Human Health limits to economic growth model were propounded, but they were not given highest importance by the World Bank, IMF, and others. In 1987, World Commission on Environment and Development was a commission was constituted, and they produced a path-breaking book called Our Common Future in 1987 that gives a very beautiful message to the world that meet the needs of present generation without compromising the ability to meet the needs of the future generation. But still, it has become a very popular definition. But in case of adaptation or adoption, we miserably failed. Later, during in 1992, Earth Summit was conducted in Rio de Janeiro, and where several children have come to gathered in that city, and they have also given a message to the world: we need Earth to survive. You are destroying Earth for us. So Earth is not only Earth is certainly not borrowed from our ancestors, but borrowed from our children. So in that way, but what happened after 1970s and 80s was that, but the world economy is swayed or controlled by market forces led by IMF and IBRD, UNO, which led to adoption of rather than UNO, which led to adoption of capitalism as format of economic development. So even though we have UN Sustainable Development Goals, they are not clearly met. So in what path the world is moving is that it is completely a destructive path, which imposes high cost on the society in terms of pollution, a disease like COVID, and the cost is borne by the public as well as government at the benefit of the multinational companies, at the benefit of few capitalists. You know that the share of the world's wealth is highly tilted or skewed towards the wealthy people. So what is the way? The COVID-19 teaches the lesson to the world community that humans must live in their own limitations, and always nature dominates over society or economy. The health and economic policies typically work under normal situation and not under unusual situations like outbreak of pandemic diseases affecting the entire country or world. This warrants that world economic situation is likely to improve with normalization of public health from pandemic COVID-19, and as long as spread of virus is not contained, the risk to the humanity and economy is imminent. There is an urgent need to recognize and value the role of nature and its resources for survival of the people and sustenance of the economy under the pandemic. Make development sustainable and equitable, one, to present and future generation. Therefore, limited consumption or conscious consumption and limited production or conscious production are the answers to all the problems the humanity faces today, from scarcity of basic environmental goods and services to pollution of the environment, such as climate change. So therefore, recently United Nations organization has proclaimed that restoring of the ecosystem is the need of the hour. So with this, I conclude by giving these three important thoughts by Mahatma Gandhi, Frank Buchanan, and Earth Summit 1992. According to Mahatma Gandhi, long back told that Mother Nature is kind enough to fulfill all our genuine needs, and she is not able to fulfill our greed. Frank Buchanan says that there is enough in the world for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed. Therefore, humanity must learn to live within the limitations of the physical environment. So with this, I stop my presentation. I thank the Jyoti Nives College for giving me an opportunity to share my a few thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your informative presentation. I would like to request you to answer a few questions from our delegates. If you may permit, I will present the questions to you. So the first question is from Varsha Rao. She says, since it's predicted that the temperature will rise by 1.5 degrees by 2040, what can we do in order to change that timeline?
Yeah, there already I have suggested two important measures. One is mitigation and another one is adaptation. So mitigation policies are aimed at mitigating the emissions of fossil fuel-based carbon emissions. For example, there are 5 to 6 sources of emissions of carbons or greenhouse gases. These including industry and power generation, transportation, and also contributions by the agriculture production and other activities. So in this regard, the mitigation activities including the afforestation. We need to bring more land under forest cover, and we need to adapt. We need to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels, especially using most probably electric vehicles, and switching over to green energy such as solar energy and also wind energy and tidal energy, and also at the same time achieve energy efficiency. Energy efficiency in the sense that using less energy to produce more goods and services. So energy per unit of energy we use should be reduced, and coal based energy should be completely controlled or completely withdrawn. So in this way, there are various measures one can think of at the national level to mitigate the carbon emissions. At the individual level also, at the industry and individual level also, we should have conscious consumption, or a conscious consumption in the sense that what to consume, what not to consume, first thing. And we should limit the waste. When you limit the waste, that resources will be available to someone else. So in this way, we should have a conscious consumption. One can have a at least 5 pairs of clothes or 10 pairs of clothes, not beyond that. One does not require so many clothes. So in the same way, consumption of food, consumption of other goods and services, we should limit, because Earth cannot supply all your greeds or wants. It can supply only needs. So in this way, we need to change the production system, which should be based on environmental friendly or green production. The consumption should also environmental friendly. In this way, we can change our behavior. And also adaptation to climate change is that we need to adapt less water intensive agriculture crops, and we should reduce the over dependence on some natural resources such as forests, as a wood. We need to shift completely our consumption and production patterns, so that in this way we can reduce the climate change or rise in temperature in the coming days. There are several ways. It will take 1 hour or more hours to explain to you. There are several measures one can think of.
Thank you, sir. Since you pointed out what we can do on an individual level, there are some questions on how is the government proposing to tackle healthcare inequalities, and sir, how effective is India's actions against climate change?
I can explain India's actions on climate change, but the health expert, Professor Selvaraj is there. He will deal with that issue, the health expenditure, how health policies are framed in India, and how they are effective, and all those issues he will be covering. But India has taken several steps according to the Paris Convention and also Kyoto Protocols. But the issue is that even though we have committed to achieve targets by 2030 through various mitigating and adaptation strategies, as I told, the climate finance is very, very limited in developing countries, because our priority is to eradicate poverty, provide employment opportunities. Those are the priorities. But on the one hand, we are promoting industries, inviting FDI flow, foreign direct investment, So the limited amount is used for climate action plan. So this results in, I have already mentioned that we are not in a position to reach the target, achieve the target with the limited finances. So therefore, public finance alone cannot act on the climate change, but we need private finances. In this way, one can mitigate the climate change in the coming days. Government alone cannot do.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the entire Department of Economics and Jyotinivas College Autonomous, I would like to thank you for an enlightening and eye-opening presentation on the pressing topic of climate change and its impact. Your explanation and modeling of climate change and its emissions and impact on economy, the modeling with public health care, climate change, economic development, and many other economic models that you presented pointed us to the broader causes of various global issues that we are facing and the behavioral changes that are required to overcome these issues. It gave us great insight into the topic and inspired us all to reconsider our actions to tackle this global problem of climate change. Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to hand over the mic to Dr. Anuja to introduce our next guest speaker, Dr. V. Selvaraju.
Thank you, Himani. So I have great pleasure to introduce our eminent guest for the day, Dr. V. Selvaraju, Consultant, Health Economics, New Delhi. Dr. Selvaraju have undertaken various consultancies in India and other countries. He served as an economist at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, New Delhi, National Consultant, World Health Organization, New Delhi, Health Economist, World Bank, New Delhi, Technical Specialist, ABT Associates, Cambridge, USA, Health Economist, Imperial College, UK, and there are numerous research papers and reports at its credit. He is a member of the governing body of Institute of Public Health, Bangalore. He is a life member, Indian Health Economics and Policy Association. He was a founder secretary, Indian Health Economics and Policy Association, and he was a member of expert group, National Health Account Cell, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Dr. Selvaraju will be presenting the topic, Healthcare in India, Lesson from COVID-19 Pandemic. So we are honored, sir, to have you with us, and I request you to take over the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for introducing me, Dr. Anuja. I must actually first thank Krishna sir for taking over and continuing the session, not only accepting to be here, but fill the gap immediately. Thanks, Krishnaji. And I also thank the college, Jyotinivas College principal in the Department of Economics faculty, and Dr. Anuja, Dr. Himani, and others, and including Praveen, who struggled a lot to help me out in getting connected. It took almost some 30-40 minutes. Yes, without wasting much time, I'll quickly get on to this. The topic chosen or given was like healthcare in India and the lessons, particularly in the context of India and its 75th year. So quickly, what I would do is give a quick overview of what is our health system, how it has evolved, and current status, and what are the challenges are the lessons out of this pandemic. Okay. First of all, to start with, I was told most participants in this webinar are students, and some of you might be interested in pursuing healthcare, health economics as possible areas for your future career or research or studies. So I thought I'll start with some basic things like health can be, I mean, it is a very, very broad. It might look so simple at one level, but if you get into this, it's like everyone defines very differently. If I don't get a proper drinking water, that's called a health issue. If I get sick, fever and cold, that's normally understood that is a health issue. Also, but to put an end to this, all this, there is a common definition that has come out from WHO, not now, it's many, many decades ago. Health is defined not just as a kind of physical and mental well-being or mental social well-being are not merely the absence of diseases or infirmity. This is how it is defined. Anything that hinders any of these concepts is broadly into the health domain, and that needs to be addressed if we need to have a healthy society. So this is the common understanding. One should not go with the narrow definition of I'm ill and go to the hospital and got well and everything is done. That's not necessarily the health in the wider context. Okay, now given that, I maybe quickly give an overview about how things have shaped in India after independence, particularly since India at 75 is the focus. See, this what is displayed in this slide is all more recent reform, recent meaning couple of decades, at least to the time I started working on health economics areas. Also, I think around this time only, health assumed a kind of, I don't call it importance, but it received its somewhat an attention when private sector started developing. So from there, I think more active policies and people are involved, both civil society as well as public system. But much before this, in fact, India survived from 47 until the policy of 83. So there is so much that has happened, like we had very widely quoted and relevant even today, something called Mudaliar Committee and Boer Committee. These were the foundations of Indian health system, independent India's health system. These were sometime around 50s and the early 60s, these two committees. They submitted a report constituted by the government of India, and I think they laid down a roadmap with much longer vision, where public health, public system was the prime, and that was the only source that was probably available those days. In addition to the other system, basically the Ayush, we call all this Ayurvedic, homeopathy, Unani, all those that Ayush segment, that is non-allopathic system, that was existing by and large in rural periphery kind of a thing. But the committees, both Boer and Mudaliar committees, though they integrated that non-allopathic system, the focus was mainly on the allopathic system, and on which things have developed, and it was more dependent on the public system. One might ask, why only public, why not private? Those days, I think there was not much private system existing, other than maybe a very small one doctor clinic and things like that. So, and also in the constitution, if you look at, health is predominantly a state subject, state meaning broadly the public system, government system. So that's how the system evolved over time. And then if at all, if there is something to call as a national health policy, I think first time it came up in a full-fledged form in 1983. And then almost after 2 decades, we had one more policy, 2002. And the recent one, much debated and so much happened, is 2018 one. So these are the 3 broad national health policies that are currently driving the health system in India. This is just to give an overview. And then beyond that, how these policies emerge also is at the back of the policies. There are quite a lot of things, work that happens, like we had a commission on macroeconomics and health that was largely supported by WHO across for I think about 26 countries participated in this, including India. We had the commission headed by one of the former health secretaries, and then 2 other health secretaries supporting that. So we had first firm India Health Report in 2003. I think that was probably a kind of eye-opening for most researchers and policymakers, including the elected representatives. This was followed immediately by a national commission. There is commission at the India level that was also set up by Government of India. That was also headed by Secretary Health India. I was fortunate to be part of both the committees to contribute a small piece on the financing of health in these reports. And then at the same time of National Health Commission was functioning, National Rural Health Mission was initiated in 2005. One might say, was there no rural health care program in India earlier? We had almost every program in India. In fact, if you look at health system in the past and how it has evolved, like we had Ministry of Health, Ministry of Family Welfare, they were separate, and then sometime around 2000 they were merged into one. It's called Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Within that there are hundreds of programs, and then there were functioning, financing, administration, very, I think they changed over time. Like we had the dial phone and then ordinary mobile phone, smartphone type. So we had quite a lot of changes in the healthcare. If you look at it, it's really enormous. We had, in fact, for everything there was a society-based model at some point in time. Malaria society, cholera society, like that, blindness society and all. What society means? A small autonomous, but not really fully autonomous. Within the public system was set up, money was given to them, and they were managing. For example, it is a blindness program that society used to manage. It had a central level society, state level society, and then money was given. There were people, personnel within those societies, they were implementing the program. What was the need for this society? Earlier, budget money was allocated. Even now, money is allocated through the budget. And why society was needed? When the budget is allocated, for instance, if it is a central program, blindness, for instance, money is allocated to the central. It is allocated to the central society. That society sends it to the state society. State society sends it to the district society. Many times, what they happen, I mean, it happened in the budget. Government of India allocates to state government allocates to district, and then does. But in the government system, when it is the Ministry of Health or Department of Health in the states, there is quite a lot of bureaucratic delays. I receive money as a Secretary Health, and then I take some time to allocate to my district counterpart. By the time that guy receives and starts planning and doing it, by probably that year is ending. And most of you, I think most of your economics background will know, budget allocated for the year, for instance, 21-22, it starts on April 1st of the year, ending on the following year, March 31st. Money allocated should be utilized. Whatever unutilized will be surrendered back to the finance department. So, what is the implication of that? If there are too many layers in the transfer of money or functions, each one takes a month or two to do things, to transfer things. By the time at the end level, what I mean, really, when you look at activities take place at the district level. By the time when it reaches to the district person, then he has to prepare himself and his staff for implementing. Probably it is 4 to 5 months down the line. From March, probably around September or August, he receives the guidelines, money, everything, and starts implementing. Effectively, program is implemented only for 6 months or 7 months. So that issue was there to take care of that. Societies were formed, but at the end, what happened? Societies more or less ended up in a similar thing because it's managed by, again, bureaucrats. Finally, everything was amalgamated into into the budget, and finally they called on a mission mode many of the activities. For instance, if you look at HIV and all, separate completely an independent thing, public system, but not within. There is a separate functionary that is working on that. Something like that was thought of under National Rural Health Mission. So they put all the programs falling under a particular ambit, and they called as an umbrella program. It is a national one. They had a state level societies, again, missions, and then things were implemented. Probably that's number one. Number two, and the other major thing that happened in the NRHM was money allocated, as I said, in the budget lapses, or that validity ends by 31st of March. In this case, what the money allocated remains with the, for instance, district of state Madhya Pradesh Rural Health Mission receives 500 crores per program in April 2021. This money will be with them. They continue to use it. Whatever remains unused on 31st of March 22, that money will remain with them. They don't need to surrender back. What will happen is, in effect, the following year, if again 500 crore was allocated and if they have the remaining previous year unused money about 200 crores, so 22-23 they will get 300 crores. So balance minus the new allocation. So they'll again have 500 crores and then they start implementing the programs. Why this was done? There will be no discontinuity in the implementation of the program. So this is how the mission mode started operating. And then I think I'll move quickly, time is running. And then what we have, I mean, we started implementing this. I mean, there are a couple of other things. One is public system is financed through budget. And then there are many other countries who are experimenting pooling of resources, basically insurance. You can't go on spending money from the public system or the budget resources. Anyway, people are spending much larger money in Indian case at least. If you look at between public and private or household spending is about 75% in the health. Public system, government spends only 25% of the total health budget. Given that, so households are incurring heavy debt or they pushed into impoverishment, all those things. So there should be something like a pooling mechanism, insurance mechanism should be tried out. So with that perspective, there was something called Swasthya Bima Yojana was tried out in 2008. But this had precursor. There are so many other schemes implemented at state level, like Chiranjeevi and in Ahmedabad in Gujarat. You had Yashaswini in Karnataka, CM's program in Tamil Nadu, Arogyasri in Andhra Pradesh and all. They were also similar. They in fact tried fast. Based on those lessons, this RSBY really evolved. And then RSBY is that concentrated mainly for the weavers because that was easy for the society to find the target beneficiaries, collect the premiums and deliver the programs. So this was under the Ministry of Labour initially, moved to Health Ministry later. Though it started with weavers initially, it's slowly expanded it. And then in 2011, there is something called high-level expert group that's also suggested a universal healthcare program. Why only target weavers, construction workers and all? You make it universal to everybody. And so that was one of the reports that also recommended some change in the financing structure. And then the recent one, all these things culminated into something like Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, that's PMJY. This is a major financing reform, one can call it, though it is still in its initial stages. This is another insurance program. This again, the main focus is on population below poverty line, and then something like construction workers, ASHA workers, like that. There are specified categories. Now, quickly to give in another overview about how India has been doing in the recent past, or how all these commissions have contributed to the system. If you look at all the reports, including like Health Policy 2002 and later one 2018, High-Level Commission, Macroeconomics, all those things, one common suggestion you find is money that we are spending is not adequate. How much are we spending? In fact, India was spending around 1.1-1.2% of GDP on healthcare. In fact, it went up to 1.7 at some point in time around early 2000 or late 90s. But for some good reasons or bad reasons, it came down to 0.9. So all these the studies, committee reports all suggested we should spend minimum 2.5 and it should go up to at least 4% of GDP. This is almost the percentage 2.5 remained in most. The maximum, some suggested 3.5 and all, but this is the kind of recommendations that came from most of the studies and reports. But it is not at one go, it was a phased manner. It is nearly impossible to do increase healthcare spending at that level. Why I'm telling all these things is in the context, I mean, one can relate to COVID towards the end. The other one is like same thing with happened with health policy 2002. In fact, committed to spend 2.5% and the next 5 years time. So you said it was 2002. We are already in 2000, almost 20 years now down the line. And where we are now, we'll get to know about, I think, 1.4%. And then the recent estimate is about 1.4%. Public health system remains why private sector is flourishing, or I mean, you know, since late 80s, if those who are raised or born before that much earlier will be able to realize earlier there was nothing like an Apollo hospital, there was nothing like an Escort hospital, things like corporate system was not there at all. Even the large private hospitals were not there. There were probably nursing homes, a small doctor clinics, but private sector slowly developed and is almost there, I would say, dominating the system at this moment. I'm not saying it's good and bad. It has its own plus and minuses. Both systems have that. And the reasons for that is poor functioning and then understaffed, non-availability of doctors, medicines and things like that in the public system, and also access. Sometimes you find a private hospital much closer or a doctor very close to you than a public system. So these are some reasons that pushed the growth of private sector. As I said, infrastructure inadequate, all those things. The one other thing I think one should note is, okay, we are spending so much money, public system is there, private system is there. What are they doing really? And there was a survey recent about 2018 National Sample Survey on morbidity. The finding was about 30% of hospitalizations. I'm not talking about outpatient treatment. Outpatient treatment is very different. Hospitalization really takes a lot of resources per day expenses like bed, doctor, medicines, everything. 30% of total hospitalization in our country are just on account of infections. Why I say just on account of infections? Infections are, most of them are preventable. It's not impossible to do. Corona is also an infection only, COVID-19. So that, I mean, this point is again to be related with COVID. We already had severe load on account of infections of the public system. That's the point. And then the other important thing in the context, also India at 75 and the pandemic, India is at the prime of population dividend. What's meant by population dividend is we have large segment of productive age population in our country at this moment. We have slightly smaller younger population and slightly smaller, much smaller older population. What does it mean? The population dependent on and the working population is much smaller at this moment. So we have large working population. They are very productive. So India should be progressing much faster at this moment. And this population will be active for next probably 20-30 years. And then most of them will move on to a cohort called aged elderly population. They will become dependent. So we have to earn more, save more for our future older population. And then the other dimension of the same population dividend is, right now we have a smaller younger population proportion percentage. When they become working group, that is 25 to something like 50, 55 or 60, that size will be smaller because they will simply transfer it to the next population group. When that's working population is small, the current large working population will move to older population. So the current younger population, younger ones, will have really more burden in terms of taking care of older population later. So there is a need for social security, and then some thought process has to go in. That is what is India at this moment. That's again, next point is the same thing. Elderly population is on the rise. That's a demographic transition. Now, quickly on I said government is spending so much on healthcare. See, there are, I put some selected states, not everybody, everything together, it will become too clumsy. Also, it was done by some other study recently. You look at it, the spending does not have any pattern with either backward state or a developed state. Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Punjab, they spend more or less same. Rajasthan spends slightly more. UP spend much larger. But if you look at health outcomes, in fact, if I missed to plot Orissa spends much larger, in fact. And there are some, the point is, spending more does not necessarily lead to better outcomes. Though the committees, when I said the high level committee, the commissions on macroeconomics and health, argued for larger allocation, not with the expectation that larger allocation will lead to better outcomes. It's all understaffed, under maintenance is completely in a difficult situation. So to meet those things, that is definitely necessary to sustain the whatever we have in the public system. So this is how the public spending in India at this moment is. I have given 2 years, 2006-7 and 2017-18. There is no major change, though there are increases, minor increases that are seen. The recommendations of all these committees have not really resulted into even to the bottom line that they wanted, 2.5% they wanted, that has not come. Meghalaya is at 2.4, that's a special category state. I think that story is very different. If you look at all the northeastern states, they will be spending much larger than the main states, larger states. The other, this slide, okay, another important aspect I would like to emphasize on this. We are spending so much money. Where is it spent? So there are 4 categories in the budget. I'm talking only about the public side spending, not the household or out of pocket that we all spend when we go to hospital, we pay to the hospital. That money is not included in this. This is only government spending. There are 4 categories under which money is allocated. That is, one is medical, which includes hospitals, dispensaries, PSCs, medical education, everything else, in rural, urban, all those things. Then there is something called general that includes like surveys done, statistics maintained, some of those minor expenditures. And then we have called something called public health and then family welfare. Public health includes prevention of diseases, identifying, including vaccine institutions. In fact, allocation to Serum Institute is also under public health program. So we have malaria, cholera, blindness, everything under public health program. And this also includes that food safety, drug control, everything comes under that. Family welfare includes primarily something like population control and then compensating for the family planning, those that were already there, some of those programs. So if you look at the upper bar, the segments on the upper bar of the diagram, that yellow one and then gray ones, they are all little smaller. It varies. The variations are very high, or is not because the budgets are allocated that way. It is because the way in which budgets are managed. For instance, if you look at Karnataka is not part of here. If you look at Rajasthan, 28% is allocated to family welfare. It's not the whole money spent on because transfer to local bodies is high. Same thing if you look at Karnataka budget, a huge budget will be there under public under general because the transfer to local bodies are booked under general. So Karnataka budget, the grey bar will be, orange bar will be very large. How they spend, whether they spend on education, they spend on primary care, that is not captured at the state level. So those top parts segments are not very conclusive, but the bottom one, blue shaded area is very clear. That is money spent on medical. The implication is nearly 60% of the money is spent on medical. What medical means, as I said, it is all hospitals and dispensaries and everything else, including medical education. All these things are spent on 2 categories if we look within medical. One is curative treatment. I'm not well, I go to the hospital, so the hospital money is utilized. Second thing, we are also including medical education. Medical colleges come under that. So nearly 60% of the money is spent on treating people and creating human resources for medical care. So this is across the state. it may vary slightly up and down in different states. So this is the again current scenario. What is right composition is a big debate. I'll not go into this at this moment. Now, I said at some time that 30% of the hospitalization cases are for infections. Now, the same hospitalization, this is a total one now. Total number of people hospitalized in the year 2017-18 is put under different income groups. Quintile is like quintile 1 is the poorest, quintile 5 is the richest patients now. And the blue one representing public, the orange one is private. So where do, for instance, poor people really go when they need hospitalization? So almost 50% of the people, poor people, get into public system. 47% of poor people still go to public system. So that 47%, you can imagine when they are the bottommost, the poorest of the country, still 47% are accessing private care. Why I insist? Private care is not free. Private care, not only not free, it is much more expensive, but they are forced into, that's the only option they had, probably they used it, or they managed to sell their property or anything else, they were still taking care there. But when we move on to the richer segment, still 32% of rich people are utilizing public system. I think that is another contrary to what happened in the poorest one. Poorest 47% is forced to use private, but the 32% of richest patients also use public system. Can't they really go into private system? Free the public resources for the poor is a big question. Though it caters to large, poor people. 32 is a big number only. Equity point. I mean, what I was trying to insist is equity, whether public system maintains equity. That's the thing. Coming into the, I think we already discussed about this population dividend. Just to give an overview about how India's population is currently distributed. We have 63, 64, or currently 66, maybe 67 now. Okay, this is the working age that is moving. Slowly it will move on to maybe next 20 years, 30 years down the line. The 66% will become aged population, 65 plus. So they will all be dependent on this 27%, the bottom one, after 30 years. So this 27% will have to support this 66 after 20 or 30 years. So that's the implication. So we are, at this moment, we are at a big advantage. We have working population, we can produce more, we can generate more GDP, more incomes, more savings. Right. Another, I think I'll have very quick, another few minutes to finish it. Okay, India is doing so well. I mean, India, of course, has progressed so much. We have reduced life expectancy, we have increased the life expectancy so much. IMR, infant mortality, maternal mortality, there is so much progress in the last 50 years. How many doctors that we have in our country compared to maybe neighboring countries? Like per 10,000 population, we have 8 doctors in India, 8 or 9 doctors in India. Much slightly bad or poorer performance compared to Pakistan, Sri Lanka, China and Singapore, but we are still better off compared to even Thailand, Philippines, Bangladesh and all. So we are not really bad in terms of it, but is it a kind of complacency? Do we need more personnel? That's the question. Right. Quickly to wind up, what is India? As I said, India has achieved a lot in the last few decades. We have reduced infant mortality, maternal mortality to a great extent. Life expectancy has improved. I remember it was something like 50, 52 and all. Now we are projecting at 70 years life expectancy. That is one reason. Other indicators like death rates have come down, birth rates have come down. So the size of the population, life expectancy of the population is increasing. The working population is at prime at around 66%. They will all now, life expectancy which was around 65 has come to 70, it will go to 75. So these people will not only move on to elderly growth, this working population, current working population, they will also live longer, like what you have in Japan and some of the European countries. We have a long working lifespan of people, and then that percentage will keep on. That's a big, I think, a challenge that India has to manage or plan from now itself. Then we have really a robust health system in place. We have both public, private, charitable institutions. Its mix may vary across states, and it has all kinds of merits and demerits. And then service provision, even now, still public system does a good service, a large amount of care is done through public system, and private also does equally good. It varies between, if you are going for a inpatient care, the system is different. When you go for an outpatient care, it's again different. So private and public have emerged. Only thing is that co-working partnerships are at times they are doing so well in many things, but there are issues at times, like what happened during the COVID pandemic time. Now, again, financing mechanism, I think I already explained, it has gone so much, it has undergone so much of changes, and we are moving towards something like a pooling mechanism, something like insurance, like we have in developed countries. Everybody pays a premium, and then that is smaller, and then they are covered for almost all kinds of healthcare needs. We have just initiated, in fact, the last 15 years, I think we have been trying with, like, yes, especially in Karnataka and all, Arogyasri, small experiments that are leading to a model that is relevant for Indian case. Right now, we have PMJY that's launched about 2-3 years ago. Now, the last slide is lessons from pandemic. Yeah, I think all of you know there is no second opinion on this. Pandemic has really shaken the system. I don't mean just the healthcare system. I think it has shaken every individual, every system, everything that exists in this, not only country, throughout the world. The globe is literally shaken. Communities are shaken, families are shaken, bureaucracy, everybody. And then it also has really altered the financing course, the way in which financing done for the either health or anything. Like we have special packages coming, stimulus packages, good, bad, those things are very different conversation. So financing has really, there is no more budget based allocation, because in pandemic, going for a budget is like, it's a killing field. So there was a stimulus packages on various things, including for health. Health was not called as stimulus, it was like went on allocating for vaccine, hospitals, purchase material, everything. You all know about it. So much came out in the public. Similarly, on the healthcare personnel, I think this is another key area that has really has taken a second thought. The way in which they were functioning, both healthcare personnel, I don't mean only the public system, including private system. In the public system, they were like, most of them were permanent employees. So the system was little, professionals were little, I would not say careless, but they were reluctant at times. When there are severe cases, they will not operate because the patient dies. There can be medical legal cases. So they sent to some specialized public hospital where death is taken on the positive side. So that is one thing. Also, there were quite a lot of other issues that were there. Now, private system, you look at the private healthcare, they were like atrocious, meaning that's how the business works. They were working hard, paid less, but they were doing all kinds of specialized care, everything. Pandemic came, private sector stopped, meaning they didn't know what to do for a variety of reasons. They may have technology, they may have much more specialized experts than the public system. But the major issue, the initial phase of the pandemic was, if patients die or any complications if patient gets into complication, who's responsible? Immediately, the previous scenario was, if anything happens to patient, the hospital is shamed and then put into penalty and all those things. those rules and regulations were there, so they were really reluctant to deal with an unknown disease. So private sector almost like stopped functioning in the initial phase of the pandemic until government involved and then evolved certain regulations. The regulation we already discussed. Second, the other thing is about community and civil society, the way in which we all lived. We were all like, I don't care about my neighbor, I don't care about my colony, like that. The moment pandemic came, if my neighbor is infected, I am likely to get infected. So it is not only I protect myself, but I also ensure my neighbor protects. So there were common sanitizations, taking care of other people, ensuring that mask is worn. Many things people have taken, both at the community level and also the NGOs and civil society. They were quite actively involved in doing this. They were all not seen as a major player, particularly in the health pre-pandemic. Most of you would know those who are working in this field. The other, the last thing that I would say is, it also has shaken the way in which systems work across boundaries, like India, China, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and all those things. COVID did not care whether I live in Pakistan, or I live in Lahore, or Delhi, Punjab, or something, right? So there was a kind of forced collaboration and cooperation among countries. If there are cases in India, Dubai cuts, Indian flights are not allowed. If there are cases rising in US flights are not allowed to land in India. So it's not the penalizing measure, but it is a kind of ensuring that is not transported to other country. Infections are not transported. The other side of the coin is vaccines. Like India had the largest producer of vaccine in the Serum and other places. It did not stop supplying only to Indians. It also supplied to various other countries. So this is a time you are supposed to act as a benevolent state or a country to protect your own neighbors and also the people who helped you or people who are in need of it. So there, the international, including both finance as well as medicines, flown across seas for various countries, right? At times, like we receive from, for instance, US, and then we also supply to US, kind of a thing. So to end with this, I think I'll close at this. In case there are questions, we'll take it up. I only remembered whenever I look at this pandemic kind of a thing, Albert Einstein's the famous statement, there is opportunity in every crisis. So pandemic has really taught very big arrogant lessons for most arrogant people or arrogant systems in the world, not only Indian scenario, everywhere it has taught a good lesson. So with this, I'll end. If there are any questions, we'll take it up.
Thank you for this very informative session, sir. Thank you for taking us through the significant healthcare reforms in India, which gave us a clear overview of the efforts made to tackle the various healthcare issues faced in the past and the important lessons one can learn from them. Your presentation was very well structured, sir, and it took us through various factors and indicators associated with healthcare policies and helped us understand our public healthcare system better and also the problems that we face. I would like to thank you to point us in the right directions of the various solutions and opportunities to overcome the current global crisis through the lessons from the pandemic. So now, if you may please permit, I will take up some questions from the audience.
Please. Sorry for a very hurried presentation. Yeah, go ahead.
So the first question is from Varsha Rao. She asks, how effective have the different healthcare reforms in India been?
Okay, how effective
have the
healthcare
reforms in India?
It's a big political question. See, I won't say they were ineffective. They are, I think, they succeeded to a large extent. I know, at least from mid-90s, both academicians and civil society are able to influence the policies, and policies are proving to be, in fact, translated into reforms. For instance, if you take the case of health insurance or the Pradhan Mantri PMJY, Jan Arogya Yojana that is coming in. It is not out of the blue. We have been talking about it for a long time. Households are spending a large amount of money for healthcare. And many of the poorer households cannot really spend. So they sell off all their property if at all they have anything. They take loan. They see, look at the households that are living on the around the poverty line. Any major heart disease, an open heart surgery will take away all the savings and then they will be put below poverty line. So this is at least for the people who are around the poverty line. Look at the people who are at the bottom of the poverty line. Heart disease does not care whether you are rich or poor. It comes to anyone. What will they do? They cannot even get admitted in a public hospital. They may even die. So the people keep spending huge amount of money on healthcare in India. So there have been efforts, recommendations to implement something like a pooled resource pooling insurance type of mechanism that was tried in various states at a smaller scale, and it is slowly shaping up for the country as a whole. That is one reform that I can clearly, I think everyone can see it. It's not just somebody's thought. It has something like 20, 25 years, at least I know, these things have come up. The other thing is looking at health personnel, shortage of health personnel. India produces a large number of nurses, but we were not having enough medical colleges. Now you see AIMS kind of medical colleges are coming up in many places. There are medical colleges. Karnataka, Maharashtra probably have the largest college. That's private thing that's coming. I mean, that has come up some time ago. Engineering and medical was quite dominant in that place. But if you look at across the country, now the public system is setting up, I would not say world class, but some super specialty hospitals across the country. So we will have fairly well qualified medical personnel, health personnel soon. Well, all these medical colleges, when they start functioning next 10 years down the line, we will have quite a lot of doctors coming in. So that will happen. One might immediately ask, we are producing, but people run away out of the country, they go to other countries and flourish. So that brain drain or the human movement has to be controlled. How do you control? You can't ask them not to go. That is individuals' right to provide proper environment for them to work and flourish, even in our system. So that is this other state. That is the other thing that is probably happening, maybe in a slower pace. It will catch up over time. So reforms are working, and financing part has not really happened. I don't know why. And at some point in time, we also are fed up with suggesting the same thing again and again. Now slowly the lingo or lingo has moved towards value for money. Okay, you're spending so much money. Are we producing enough? Are we spending it more effectively, efficiently, even this 1.5% of the GDP? So we are questioning that. So if we justify, okay, we are producing it, but if we give more, we will be able to be more efficient. So that is the 2.5 target, minimum target one is expecting. So we are able to make some bit of progress on that. The other reform is correct. The provider financier link. What is happening at this moment? We will not talk about all these things can happen only in the public system. Private system, what you can do, you can only bring in more regulations, laws, and rules to make them function effectively without harming the society. That is the only thing you can do. You can't alter their system. You can't ask somebody that you can treat only this fellow, you cannot treat this fellow, or you have to set up a hospital only here. You can give incentives to set up a hospital in a backward district of Aurangabad or something. So policy reforms are happening. It will happen, and it's a long process. And to make some bitter truth to some of you is, health ministry or department was seen as punishment posting at some point in time. You won't. It's like those who are not liked by many ministers are not able to cope up with anywhere will be put up in health. This is the truth in 80s. Slowly things are changing. So when such a kind of people were there, they were also like waiting for retirement and waiting their time. Why honestly get into trouble? System remained like that. So things are changing. Now we have, now meaning in fact for quite some time, there are quite a lot of dynamic people that have taken over the system. And pandemic has really taught a lesson to the bureaucracy or the politicians that health is an important thing. It's a question of time. Reforms are happening in various small things. It will take a longer time to see the holistic picture. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Due to time constraint, we will not be able to take further questions.
It's already 12. Yeah.
So, on behalf of the Department of Economics, Jyotinivas College Autonomous, and on my own behalf, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all the speakers for gracing us with your important work and sharing with us your findings and opinions today. I would like to thank Dr. Krishna Raj to enlighten us about the impact of climate change on the various aspects of our life and pointing us to the right behavioral and policy changes that are required to overcome the current situation. A big thank you to Dr. Selvaraju for taking us through the significant public healthcare reforms and helping us understand our public healthcare system better. And also ending it on a positive note with the lessons that one can take from the pandemic or the other healthcare issues that we have faced. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our principal, Dr. Sister Lalita Thomas, for encouraging and guiding us to organize this webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to Mr. Praveen and the entire technical team for making this virtual event possible today. I would like to thank our entire Department of Economics, starting with Dr. Leena Nair, our HOD, for guiding us throughout this process of organizing the event, Dr. Radha Ganapati and Dr. Anuja Balakrishnan, and Ms. Himani Rathod for organizing and managing the webinar. Lastly, I would like to thank our delegates for participating and being with us this morning and also interacting with as much as possible. Now, I would like to request everyone to access the feedback form link, which will be posted in the chat box to help us understand your experience and conduct more events like this in the future. The e-certificate will be emailed to you after the form is submitted successfully. Thank you.
Himani, 1 second.
Yes,
I
sir.
think there is an there is an interesting question by, I think, Barsha Rao. What advice would you give to someone who is looking to pursue health economics? That's the whole purpose of the organizing this session, I think, is to create, there is space for everyone to get into health economics. This is a new area and so much happening. I think everybody's contribution will have some impact on the system itself. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.